Alright, so prior to this video, we talked about a one-to-many relationship, and we created a database called My Company and inserted some data into it. Now, prior to filming this video, I went ahead and dropped that database because I'm going to be using the same name to show a one-to-one relationship. I really liked the example of a company with employees and departments, and it'll fit through all three of these examples, so just a quick note, in between each video, the database will be dropped so that we can create them again. Now, if you did not drop your database from the last video, you're going to either want to drop it now, or you're going to want to call your database something else as you follow along. So, with that being said, let's get started. The very first line of code that we want to type is to actually create the database. So we're going to use the command create database, and I'm going to call this My Company. And we also want to connect to that database. So we're going to use the /c and My Company, because that's the name of the database. Alright, the next few lines of code are going to create a table called departments. This table is going to have two columns, ID and name. The ID column is an integer type and is set to be the primary key for this table. The name column is a varchar type with a maximum length of 50 characters. So to create that, we're going to need to use the create table command, and we're going to call this departments with an ID as an integer and the primary key, and the name with a character limit of 50. Alright, and we finished with this table, so we're going to put a semicolon at the end to indicate that we're done. The next few lines that we're going to type are going to create a table called employees, and this table will have 6 columns: ID, name, age, salary, department ID, and manager ID. The ID column is an integer type, and it's going to be the primary key for this table. The other columns are self-explanatory, really, except for department ID and manager ID. These columns are for foreign keys that reference the ID column in the departments table for department ID and the ID column of the employees table for the manager ID. So let's get that typed out. So we're going to create the table. It's called employees. And in here we have ID, which is an integer. It's the primary key. We have the name. We're going to give it a character. We're just going to give all of these that are varchar a character limit of 50. Their age. Salary. Now salary, I'm going to use decimal, which I also used in the last video. And the first parameter is talking about how many numbers can be to the left-hand side of the decimal, while the second number is how many can be to the right of the decimal. Right. And the manager ID that I'm typing out here, I'm going to set initially to be null, because when you don't have anyone in this table yet, how can you reference a number that we're going to have on line 11? How can we reference that if it hasn't been created yet? Well, we can't. But if we have this property set to null, then initially it will be set to null, and we can later update to match the number that we want. So we also need the command foreign key. And our foreign keys, we're going to have two. The first one is pointing to the department ID column, and we are in this column referencing the departments table, specifically the ID column. Next, we're going to have one more foreign key. And I just went ahead and copied this down to make it easier. But this one is pointing to our manager column right here, our manager ID. and we are referencing the same table that we're currently in the IDs column. All right, so that looks good. We're done with this table, so we need to close it off in a semicolon. Next, we need to actually put some data in here so that we are able to see that it's working. We're going to put 2 entries into the departments table and 2 into the employees table. So to do that, we're going to use the insert into command. And we're going to insert into departments an ID and a name. And the values that we're putting in are going to be a 1 for the first one, and we'll call this sales. I'm just going to copy this down to make it easier, because we just need to change the value for this. With the ID of a 2, that will stand for the marketing department. Alright, so we've created 2 departments once we run this command. Next, let's create some employees. So, we're going to use the insert into command again, but this time we're inserting into the employees table. And we're going to insert an ID, a name, an age, their salary, department ID, and manager ID. And the values that we are putting in, the first person we're creating, they'll have an ID of 1. Their name will be John. John is 25 years old. John makes $50,000. The department he works in is sales. And because he is the very first person we are creating, the manager ID needs to be set to null, because this needs to be created before we can set that manager ID. Alright, now let's insert one more. So these will be run in order. So now, when we get to the second person with the ID of 2, her name will be Jane. Jane's 30, and she makes $60,000 a year. Jane, let's also have her work in sales, but this time we're going to set her manager ID to 1. So what that indicates is that the person who has an ID of 1 is her manager, and in that case it will be John. So John doesn't have a manager right now, but Jane does, and her manager is John. Now, if I were to run this, that is exactly what we would get. So, you know what, let's go ahead and do that. So, first, let's select everything from the departments table, and let's also select everything from the employees table. And let's see everyone in the employees table where the manager ID is set to 1, which would be John. So what employees does John manage? That's what we should see, which should be Jane. So what we should see here is sales and marketing. What we should see here is John and Jane. And what we should see here is just Jane, because her manager is John. Let's test that theory out. So, to run this command, I will say psql-u, and the user I'm using is Postgres, and the file that I would like to run is called my company. And actually, you know what? Let me make sure. I do not believe I am in the right place just yet. Good thing I checked. Okay, so we should Always make sure you're in the right spot before you run these commands. Excellent. All right, so let me try that again. PSQL-U, we're the Postgres user, and the file we want to run is my company SQL. And enter. We'll enter our password and just wait for it to run. Okay, and let's see that we got everything that we expected. So the first command, creating a database, check. Connect to that database, that second command, check. Create 2 tables, check and check. Next, insert 2 into departments and 2 into employees, check and check. Now we want to see all of the departments, which should be sales and marketing, check. Next, we'll see all the employees, which should be Jane and John, check. And last but not least, we want to see the people that John managed, which in this case is just Jane, and that is exactly what we see. Now, if we wanted to update it to have John have a manager, and in this case we can say Jane, how we would do that is we would run the following. So we've already ran these, so I'm just going to comment them out. I'll leave these in. But comment these out so that our command, when we run this file again, will connect to the database My Company. It will select everyone from these tables, and then it will select Jane here. But let's update and say update the employees table. We're going to set the manager ID column to 2, where the ID of the user is 1. So this will set Jane as John's manager. And to make sure that that goes through, the last thing that we will run is to select all from employees where the manager ID is equal to 2, because that's what we're setting it as right here. So let me run this command again and see that we get that. Alright, so the first thing we should get are sales and marketing. Check, because that's the department, that's what's in the departments table. Next, the employees, John and Jane. Check. Next, we should just get Jane. Oops, sorry, went up too far. Which is what we get. And then we have updated it, so next we should get John, which we do. That is a 1-to-1 relationship example. If you have any questions, please just send me a message on Slack, let me know, and I would be happy to help you. Next, we're going to get into a many-to-many type relationship.